Today, in the span of a few hours, one small region of the Middle East got hit by three completely different natural hazards at the same time. A magnitude 5.4 earthquake struck off the coast of Egypt and shook buildings as far away as the Dead Sea. A wildfire broke out near Beit Shemesh, forcing families out of their homes with whatever they could grab on the way out the door. And in the Jordan Valley, temperatures hit 113 degrees Fahrenheit, part of a heatwave, so severe it's forcing Hungary to shut down its only nuclear power plant because it's cooling. Water source is drying up. None of these events are connected to each other geologically, but together they show exactly how one region can get squeezed from every direction at once on the exact same day. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Let's get into it. The earthquake. A shake felt across two countries. Early Sunday, August 2nd, 2026, an earthquake measuring magnitude 5.4 struck off the coast of Egypt. According to the German Research Center for Geosciences, GFZ, which measured the rupture at a shallow depth of 10 kilometers. Egypt's own National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics measured it slightly higher, at 5.6, with an epicenter located roughly 38 kilometers north of the city of Suez. The European Mediterranean Seismological Center recorded a slightly different reading still, magnitude 5.2, the kind of minor variation between agencies that's completely normal in the hours immediately following an earthquake, before all networks fully reconcile their data. Whatever the exact figure, the shaking was strong enough to be felt well beyond Egypt's borders, with residents across southern and central Israel, including the Dead Sea area, reporting tremors early Sunday morning. People described it simply as everything shook, that sudden disorienting few seconds where furniture rattles and you're not yet sure how serious it's going to get. The Egyptian Red Crescent activated its emergency response plan across the governorates, where shaking was reported, and urged residents to avoid any buildings already showing signs of structural damage, while officials completed their assessment. As of this reporting, no casualties or property damage have been confirmed in either Egypt or Israel, a genuinely positive outcome for an earthquake of this magnitude. The wildfire. A blaze. Near one of Israel's historic regions. Hours after the earthquake was felt across the region, a separate and unrelated wildfire broke out in a forest near Beit Shemesh, a city roughly 30 kilometers west of Jerusalem. Israel's fire and rescue service confirmed the blaze forced the evacuation of homes in the nearby community of Moshav Ksalan that sat closest to the advancing flames. For the families living closest to the fire line, this meant leaving quickly, grabbing pets, important documents, whatever fit in a car in the space of a few minutes, not knowing yet whether they'd be returning to a home still standing. Approximately 30 firefighting squads and 6 aircraft were deployed to contain the fire, and 2 major routes, Highway 395 and Highway 375, were sealed off as a precaution while crews worked. By the time firefighters gained control of the blaze, officials confirmed the fire had caused some property damage, but that no one had been injured. Even after containment, the fire and rescue service reported crews remained on site at 2 points within the Moshav, actively working to fully extinguish remaining flames and conducting thermal scans specifically to make sure the fire didn't reignite once conditions shifted. In its public statement, the service issued a pointed reminder to residents, specifically warning against lighting any fires in open areas or forests during what it described as days of heavy heat and strong wind, a warning that connects directly to the third hazard hitting the region simultaneously. The heat, 113 degrees, and a nuclear plant. Shutting down the wildfire near Beit Shemesh didn't ignite in isolation. It broke out during an intense regional heat wave that has pushed temperatures in Israel's Jordan Valley to 113 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 45 degrees Celsius this weekend, the kind of heat that turns a short walk outside into a genuine health risk within minutes, especially for children, the elderly, and outdoor workers. This particular heat wave's reach extends well beyond Israel. In Hungary, authorities announced the country's sole nuclear power plant will be forced to shut down for the first time in more than 4 decades, a consequence of the Danube River drying out to the point where it can no longer reliably supply the volume of cooling water the facility depends on to operate safely. Nuclear plants require enormous, consistent volumes of water, specifically for reactor cooling, and when a river supplying that water drops too low or its temperature rises too high, operators have to scale back or halt operations entirely as a safety precaution, regardless of ongoing electricity demand. That a heat wave can force a national nuclear facility offline is a striking illustration of just how far the practical consequences of extreme heat and drought can extend beyond the immediately obvious impacts like wildfires or heat stroke cases. Why these 3 events aren't actually connected, but still matter together. It's worth being precise here. The earthquake off Egypt's coast has no causal relationship whatsoever to the wildfire near Beit Shemesh or the extreme heat gripping the Jordan Valley and much of Central Europe. Earthquakes are driven by tectonic plate movement along fault lines, a process operating on a completely different timescale and mechanism than atmospheric heat and wildfire risk. If these three events had happened in 3 different weeks, they likely wouldn't warrant being discussed together at all. What makes this specific day worth examining as a single story isn't a shared cause. It's what happens to emergencies. Response capacity and public attention when unrelated hazards cluster together in time. Fire crews responding to a wildfire evacuation are simultaneously operating under an active regional heat advisory. Communities assessing potential earthquake damage are doing so during the same week. Their local infrastructure, water supplies, cooling systems, emergency shelters is already under stress from extreme heat. Individual hazards don't pause to wait for other hazards to resolve first. And when multiple types genuinely do overlap, even coincidentally, the practical burden on emergency responders and affected families' compounds, regardless of whether the underlying causes are connected. The bigger regional heat pattern. This weekend's heat in Israel and Hungary sits inside a broader extreme heat pattern that has gripped large parts of Europe and the Middle East for much of this summer, tied to persistent, unusually intense high-pressure heat domes settling over enormous stretches of land for extended periods. These systems suppress rainfall, dry out rivers and vegetation, and push temperatures well above seasonal norms across a geographic area stretching from the Iberian Peninsula through Central Europe and into the Eastern Mediterranean. Spain's deadliest wildfire in Andalusian history, simultaneous major fires across France, Portugal, and Greece, Germany's Rhine River sinking toward record lows, and now Hungary's nuclear shutdown and Israel's 113-degree reading are all downstream consequences of that same broad atmospheric setup, even though each one plays out through a completely different local mechanism. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever experienced more than one type of natural hazard hitting at the same time? If you want to be the first to know every time something major happens with Earth's weather and geology, subscribe to this channel. It's completely free, and a thumbs up genuinely helps this reach more people. Let's push for 5,000 likes on this one. What happens? Next, Egyptian and Israeli authorities continue monitoring for aftershocks following Sunday's earthquake, though as of this reporting, no further significant seismic activity has been reported in the area. Israel's Fire and Rescue Service continues monitoring the Beit Shemesh fire site for any signs of reignition, while reiterating public warnings about fire risk during the ongoing heat wave. In Hungary, officials have not provided a specific timeline for when Danube water levels might recover, enough to resume normal nuclear plant operations, a situation echoing what we've seen play out with Germany's Rhine, where recovery depends entirely on sustained future rainfall rather than any fixed schedule. Final thought, no single event covered in this video on its own represents a major catastrophe. The earthquake caused no confirmed damage. The wildfire was contained without injury. The heat wave, while genuinely extreme, is part of a pattern this region has now lived through repeatedly this year. But for the family in Moshe Ksalan who spent this Sunday afternoon deciding what to grab on their way out the door, or the resident in southern Israel who felt the ground move without knowing yet whether it was the start of something worse, this wasn't a statistic, it was one long, uncertain day. Nature doesn't wait for one disaster to end before starting another, and as today showed, the hardest part of a summer like this one isn't usually a single catastrophic event. It's the days when several emergencies arrive at once and everyone, from firefighters to families, has to respond to all of them at the same time. Subscribe so you don't miss the next update. Leave that comment below. Has more than one hazard ever hit you at the same time? 5,000 likes on this video. Let's go. See you in the next one.